The Winter King is a British historical fiction television series based on Bernard Cornwell's trilogy, The Warlord Chronicles. In 2020, Epix announced that the live-action adaptation had been greenlit. 2 episodes aired in August on MGM+, in the US, ITVX in the UK. One of the production companies involved, Bad Wolf, should sound familiar to you because they're also the people who worked on Doctor Who, The Night of, His Dark Materials, the list goes on. Otto Bathurst should also sound familiar. It's attached as both director and producer. He directed the first episode of Black Mirror, first 2 episodes of Halo, and the first 3 episodes of Peaky Blinders. So he's pretty well known for his pilots. Many have drawn comparisons to this show to other historical fiction adaptations like The Last Kingdom, based off the same author's books, and Outlander, as well as Game of Thrones, which isn't historical fiction as much. None of these have been considered very accurate in their portrayal of history. It was scripted by Kate Brooke and Ed Whitmore, these 2 episodes. The story of Arthur, Merlin, the Knights of the Round Table, but I hear that a lot of it doesn't even involve the Knights of the Round Table. Let's jump into it. What did you think of the first 2 episodes?
Well, you said Outlander, Game of Thrones, and then which other one?
The Last Kingdom.
The Last Kingdom. All 3 of those I had in my comparisons list.
Well, I don't think you've seen The Last Kingdom, have you?
Yeah, I saw like the first episode of it years ago.
What did you think of like budgetary-wise, where Game of Thrones, The Last Kingdom, and this landed? Like, if you were to rate them.
This is last in terms of budget, and then you would have The Last Kingdom, which, if I remember correctly, did have quite a budget for it.
Nope, it did not. No, in fact, it paled in comparison to Game of Thrones. I think in the first season it was like $10 million or less to make it, and I think for every episode of Game of Thrones by the end there,
it was by the end it was one of the most expensive TV shows of all time.
Was it like $10 million an episode?
Something like that, maybe even more.
And it's nothing compared to what Marvel does.
MGM Plus, they were the ones to do Godfather of Harlem, right?
I believe so, yeah.
And then they also did...
Well, I mean, Epix and MGM Plus, they are the same company. I think they're both owned by Amazon or something, yeah.
But then they also did Pennyworth, Get Shorty from, I think, was Epix, and then, it transferred over to MGM Plus.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like The Winter King, at least for the first 2 episodes that we got here, it doesn't seem like it falls in their wheelhouse.
Why not?
Because, again, you have Pennyworth, Get Shorty from, Godfather of Harlem. None of them are like the medieval type TV shows.
Okay, so it's a new genre for them. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that they were trying... If this show came out 10 years ago, I think it would be a lot better.
You mean
a lot better?
It would be considered a lot better.
Than it is
So
now.
You didn't like it?
Not as much as I think I wanted to going in.
How familiar are you with the Arthur Merlin storyline? Like, just the mythos?
No, I think, like, Merlin is the only show that I think has even tried to touch anything like that.
Yeah, I took some European history courses in college, I remember, and it was a big deal because, like, when Arthur existed in real life, like, no one was writing about him. But then, like, 300 years later, some writers came out and they started making these romances with Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot, and then it became a whole, like, mythical, like, the Holy Grail, and all these stories started coming out from that time, all made up, wizards, witches, all that stuff.
Well, Arthur isn't even the main character in this show.
Okay, it seems like he's not in the book either.
He's not in the book. That makes so much more sense.
I think it's like Sir Duffer or something like that, right?
Yeah, because that ends up being the main character. But for the first 25 to 30 minutes of this show, we follow Arthur. He's the first face we see. We see that he's just been in battle. He lost his brother, and also his dad is king.
Now, when you say his brother, are you talking about Mordred?
Mordred.
So that's weird to me because I've seen a few recreations of the whole Arthur thing, especially in Merlin with Colin, whatever his face is. I'm pretty sure Mordred has always been sort of a villain character to Arthur, and I don't remember his lineage being as connected as being his brother, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah, because Mordred you're supposed to be really sad that, like, Arthur lost him in war, because his dad is King Uther Pendragon.
Yes, that's always the same. It's always Uther.
And is Uther always a dick? Uther
sometimes has an arc where he, like, becomes a good dad, but most of the time he's not the best.
This does not follow the arc where he somehow ends up becoming
redeems
good.
Himself?
Nothing like that. Yeah. Because in the first episode, what he does is he's ready to kill Arthur. Mm-hmm. Literally, he gets everyone from all around. I guess it is kind of like that's the round table that you're talking about.
No, I don't think it is. But
it's not actually a round table. What it is it's a room filled with people, kind of like from Avalon. Merlin is the person who runs Avalon. All these people that lead certain types of tribes and land all around.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of people in the round table. I think there was over 1,000.
Oh, so, well, yeah, no. Here they like, I guess,
but it was like the
it
main knights
people
that Arthur would work with when he was off doing his things. And I think he was the one who created it, like the whole idea. I think right now you're just describing maybe their government.
Yeah.
And so how Uther why does he hate his son, though?
Because he feels like he is responsible for Mordred's death.
Okay.
He does not want to accept any other possibility. Again, he raises his sword to Arthur like 2 times, ready to kill him.
The most recent thing I can think of where the dad's character blames maybe the other sibling for the death, or is at least very depressed about it, is the big blue... what was that thing called?
The big prize door?
The big prize door, thank you, where one of the twins died, and then the other one was the main character, and his dad was really depressed all the time, and it just seemed like he liked the other brother better. So sorry for the detract.
But Arthur, he's banished from the council, banished from Britain, because this is Britain in the 5th century. In fact, we get text confirming that at the very beginning of the show.
Really upset when this first came out, the trailers, they started saying England in the 5th century, and England didn't exist in the 5th century. So like all the fans of the books came out and they were bashing it, and they were saying this is ridiculous. They also didn't like some of the casting, but we'll get into that later.
It's historical fiction, right?
Yes, so, it's completely made up.
Basically. In the end, it really doesn't seem like it would matter that much. But I guess if you really like the books, I guess that makes sense. Anyways, Arthur, he's thrown out of Britain, and then he comes across these Saxon people. Now, if I remember correctly, Saxons were villains in The Last Kingdom, right? Or something like that. I
didn't watch the show that much.
I don't think that this is the first time
people
Saxons
did ask
being
whether or not they needed to watch one or the other first, and definitely no.
Oh, well,
you can jump between either one.
They're not the same show.
They're not the same one. They're not based off the same books. The Winter King is actually the first book of the Warlord Chronicles, just like Game of Thrones is the first one of Ice and Fire or whatever that George R. R. Martin series is. But I did find it interesting how like maybe you'll have the character names that sync up a little bit with his other work, and it just seems like Bernard Cornwell, even if you don't like the show, you might enjoy just jumping in and reading some of his stuff.
He sounds like Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, that's okay. And Wheel of Time has been brought up.
Wheel of Time, that's one of my comparisons. Legend of the Seeker, also Vikings.
Well, costuming wise, which looks more realistic? Does this do a good job at that?
Costume. Here's when it comes to costume and when it comes to music, like especially the orchestra, a lot of strings. I thought that they did a great job with those two things. They're probably the strongest thing about the whole entire show.
How about the landscape? Like we know in this day and age, we got like some crazy green villages.
I mean, like
I know it's a lot of England.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of a budget to it, so it's not a lot.
So where do you see that the most? Just the CGI?
I would say so.
Do you get a chance to actually have that other than war? Like, because I don't think magic exists here, right? Merlin isn't.
Magic does exist because Arthur, he finds Durfel, the main character, when he's like 12 years old. Yes. It actually was kind of hard to watch because he has a spike through him, and there's a ton of dead Saxons everywhere. Yeah. And he's the only one that's still alive. But again, he has a spike literally through his chest, and he would be dead. It seemed like, because this seemed like it would at least pierce his heart. But no, somehow Durfel is alive. Arthur saves him, lifts him off the spike. There's one of those things where it's like, we're going to count to 3 and then lifts him on 2. Is able to do so pretty fast. I felt like there was more of an effective way to do that. But anyways, he brings him to Avalon, which is where Merlin, who is really more a father figure. In fact, he's the person who...
Yeah, Merlin's old again. Yes. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I liked it when Merlin was the same age as Arthur. That they were frenemies.
Merlin is more a father figure to Arthur than Uther is.
He was like Alfred the butler.
He was the person... Yes, because he was the person to stop Uther from even killing him the first time and being like, you know what we should do? We should just actually make him unallowed to come back.
People were upset about Merlin's representation because he in the books apparently is like just a wild card character and kind of crazy.
Nothing like
this. And they really toned him down.
Because when Arthur brings Durfel to Avalon, Arthur is just like, okay, bye, leaves. He's not there for like a majority of the first and second episode. Yeah. And we just followed him the first 30 minutes, and it falls into the same trap that I think some some of these shows whenever they try to switch the main character midway through, such as like Mayor of Kingstown, if you remember that. Here it's the same thing. I like following Arthur more, but then it switches to Durful midway through. And the only thing we even really get from Durful is that Merlin is, again, his father figure. I guess Merlin is just a father figure.
It's like his tutor, though, I think, right? Like, doesn't he takes him under his wing and then he starts teaching him magic? Yes?
Yeah, well, no, because magic is in the show, but Durful, we haven't seen him use it yet. Mew, that's the person that Durful is into. She is way more magical than he is. Like, she has something to her, but it's not really established. And magic for this show isn't really established, the ground rules for it.
Well, I think what they're doing is that it's like magic tricks. It's not actual real magic.
No, Mew has something to her. Like, she's able, we don't know what it is yet, but they have hinted at it so heavily in the first 2 episodes. Okay. Where she can either, like, tell the future.
Beyond showmanship?
Or something. Yeah, Merlin, he can definitely tell the future. He just has to touch something and suddenly he gets, like, a frontward flash as to what exactly
back in the day, though, they could be pretty credible. Like, there would still be those stories and people would believe them. That doesn't necessarily make them true. Like, there'd be astounding feats back, like with mirrors and stuff. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but
from everything I read about it, the books didn't actually show magic, but I could be completely wrong. I mean,
Mew literally can't be with Durful because it's her destiny. It's the destiny by the gods because of the path that she's chosen to do, which is the path of magic, it seems like.
Sure. Okay, so I heard the second episode is better than the first. The first episode just sounds like the first part was Uther getting mad at Arthur, and then there's an introduction of a lot of characters. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, because Merlin, he has a frontward vision, because like I said, he can tell the future. A vision of a tyrannical future king who was just born from Queen of Norwina, who is King Uther's wife.
Okay.
And because of this, he decides to go to Uther and is like, look, you cannot let this person, your new son, take over the kingdom because he kills his own people. He's going to be a tyrant. He's going to be, like, really, really bad.
Always with the prophecies with these things.
Yeah, but Uther doesn't want to hear it. He's like, no, I don't believe you.
Even Wednesday had a prophecy in it, the ending of that pilot. It just reminds me a little bit also of Disenchanted.
There's a lot of prophecies in that as well?
No, it's just the Netflix, like, medieval, the kings getting mad at each other, and this is, again, like Game of Thrones 2, where it's the succession, right? Where it's going from there. Is Uther super old or something? I know he's played by the guy from V for Vendetta and Sherlock Holmes, so he's looking for an heir, but he doesn't want to give it to Arthur anymore, and that's what
that's why Merlin decides that he's going to go out there and try to find Arthur. And it seemed like that was going to be the season story arc for Merlin. He was just going to kind of be out there trying to find him for episodes, but no, it takes like 5 minutes for the show to end with Arthur, with him finding Arthur and saying, you have to come back to the kingdom.
Why do you think people dislike the first episode? Because I think it's fair to say that the second episode has been liked a lot more than it. And, like, what do you think?
The first episode has a slow pace. Well, it's very dense, but also a snail's pace. In fact, the villain that they set up, who's probably going to be the villain for the whole entire series, King Gunless, for some reason he decided to go to King Uther because they've been enemies for decades.
But they're both kings.
Yes, they're both kings, but King Gunless is asking for forgiveness, I guess, for all the time, like, for the fights. I
hope he brought some gifts.
I mean, really what he does is he kneels down to King Uther and he kisses his ring and says that he's not going to help his uncle because apparently King Uther is villains with his uncle as well. Enemies. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but the main twist there was that Durful, the person that killed his mom and set up kind of the attack against the Saxons, was King Gunless. So now he's going to have to kind of...
Wait, what? Durful, the little kid that you said was
There's
around.
a time jump, 8 years later. Yeah. That's when he's like with Nemu and stuff like that. After Arthur leaves, that's when the time jump happens. And so
different characters playing these roles, though. So Stuart Campbell, the guy who was in Rogue Heroes, that show that's going on, he only comes to play Durful 8 years in the future.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and
I hear he wears a terrible wig. People were making fun of his hair.
Well, his look was just very strange.
Corny?
Yeah, I would say so. And the reason why he's at where King Uther is because Merlin decided to ask him to come along because the fact that Uther has had this baby plays such a big factor into it.
All right.
But if you're saying that the second episode is better, I'm glad to hear that because I thought that the second episode was better also. Uther dies almost immediately right off the bat. We get like a 10-minute montage of him. Okay. And he's just getting sicker and sicker and his hair is like falling out. We see that it's very clear that he's not going to be able to live.
He's on his last legs.
And I thought that his final scene, about 10 minutes into the episode, was probably the best that the show got emotionally wise because Uther, he's kind of sorry, we learned, for kicking Arthur out, and says that Arthur is someone...
So there is a redemption arc. You said there was no redemption
arc.
arc.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, throughout, you have to understand that this was a full first episode where he's just playing an evil character. Someone that he trusts a lot. Someone that he took the word with Merlin to let Arthur just, like, kind of leave. He doesn't even listen to at this point when he's hearing that his son is going to be a tyrant and is going to be someone that kills just for the fun of it.
All right.
So, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know how you're really supposed to feel about Uther by the end.
He's a complicated guy.
But
he led the kingdom for a long time, and the kingdom is still around, so that's...
But the kingdom is not in good shape either. Mm-hmm. And also, we get Merlin at the very beginning of the second episode. He's still speaking to Arthur. He's like, you have to come back, and Arthur makes it clear he's not going to come back to the kingdom.
Okay, so where does Owain fit into all of this?
Owain, okay, so he was actually probably my favorite character of the first 2 episodes.
And you recognized him, I hope.
No.
Yeah. Really? The guy from Lovesick, the guy from Sex Education, he dated the
Wait, that was him?
I believe so.
Why is he in this? I mean, like, he doesn't even really play...
Is he not a comedy guy?
No, he's...
comedy guy.
He's the friend, actually. He's the friend of Arthur, and he was someone that went to the king with when they had Mordred's body.
Well, it says here he's Uther's champion of Demunia, which is, or however you pronounce the place they're at. Yeah.
He's going to be also the trainer of Durful, because Durful is underneath the basement, I guess, training with his sword at the beginning of the second episode.
Oh, I thought it was Merlin who was training Durful. So, yeah, now this is making more sense.
Yeah, so the second episode really kicks it up a notch, though, about midway through, because that's when we learn just how villainous King Gunless is. He goes to Avalon, and
now that his main competition is dead, I would assume so.
But he like, kind of, what's the word? He paid his respects, or it's not even paid his respects, like, he... What's it called?
Spit on the grave. I mean, I would think that he would have done something just to show that everything that he had done up until then had been an act.
That's exactly what he does. Because it gets a little hard to watch when it gets to the fight scene. He goes to Avalon. There's a baby there.
Yes,
it's Queen of Norwena's baby. And she gives him the baby. He's just kind of talking about how small it is. And then he pulls out a knife and just kills the baby.
But, like,
and you see the whole thing, on screen.
Yeah, so this is the scene that people were talking about, because they said in the book they did it, and they assumed that when they showed the visual representation of it, they would have more, like, subtlety or, like, not show it.
I thought that we were past the point where kind of rape's being shown on screen, because that's what happens to Nemu as well.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, they show it on screen, and it felt like it. I mean, I thought that seems like something that we would have seen maybe 15 years ago. Well, at this point, I thought there would be more nuance to when you introduce a story like that.
What's the singer's show, the Starlight Singer guy's show? The Idol?
The Idol,
yeah. I mean, that shows you that rapes aren't done in shows.
Well, and I was just wondering what the point of it was, because it just does seem like such an archaic type of storyline to throw in there as well.
I mean, the books were written 20-some years ago, and
I get that you're trying to
show... shock. Yeah.
You're trying to show King Gunless as this terrible person, because he has a ton of people killed, and Queen Norwena probably has the most brutal death. He goes into their tent.
So she's dead too.
He goes into their tent, and he's like, kiss my sword, and when she kisses his sword, just stabs her, and you see the sword go through the neck of her. So Merlin ends up dying as well. And I have to, like, the last 25 minutes...
Who's left? There's Arthur? Yeah?
Yeah, well, it's hard to, like, kind of look away, because that's when the show started to get really good. Are you sure Merlin's
dead? I think Merlin's a main character. Are you sure he's dead?
Merlin? Yeah, well, it seemed like he was.
Okay,
we see him get... There's a chance, but we see him get stabbed.
There's, like, a 99% chance
I
he's not dead.
thought for sure that he was dead, because
I don't think
the show made it seem like it was going to be that way. And as you said... Who is left at this point? Because for the first 2 episodes, we've been introduced to Uther. He's gone at the beginning. We've been introduced to Queen of Norwena. She's dead. And then we get Merlin, and I guess you're saying now he's alive.
Yeah, I'm going to say Merlin's probably alive. You have Nemu, right? She's still running around. Durful.
Yeah, like I said, she's the one that's raped by King Gunless, but she's able to make it out with Durful. And Durful and him are... and Durful and these, like, I guess, survivors, they all meet up. And then you have King Gunless. Gunless, yes. Okay. He's asking like all of his army to go out and try and find them, because he realizes that the baby that he killed was actually not the baby that they said that it was. This was actually planned.
Okay, this is like Game of Thrones, where, like, remember Joffrey tries to get all the babies killed.
That's exactly what it was like.
Yeah, so it's just,
that was the example.
They're following the same
because the baby has this, like, deformed hand and also this deformed foot. That's how he's able to tell. So when he looks at the baby that he killed, and the baby seemed fine.
So you like this episode or not? Like
It's hard to say because it's definitely better than the second episode was.
You mean the first episode was?
Then the first episode was?
Okay, you only watched 2. The thing I'm trying to figure out is, are you going to watch any more? Would you recommend it to anybody?
I think if you really, really like medieval shows, you probably
like Renaissance literature, any of that stuff?
Yes, you probably will enjoy this show, but also I'm not going to watch any more of it.
So you're not?
Because it seemed so ridiculous. The second episode seemed like something that a show should maybe save until the 7th episode, when you've gotten to get more of the characters. Queen of Norwina.
So it hits harder.
Yes, because Queen of Norwina, I don't even really know anything about her aside from the fact that she birthed the cursed child.
Yeah.
Uther, his death scene was sad, but again, you only get really him in the first episode being a dick. King Gunlius, I feel like I get that it's based off a book, and this may have happened early on in the book, but I think it would have helped if they had like set up a couple episodes where King Gunlius is at his most noble, and he's really helpful and shows that he's actually for King Uther, because when he turns in the second episode, it doesn't even seem like it was really that big a twist. We get at the very end of the first episode that Durful sees a vision of King Gunlius being evil, so when he's evil in the second episode, it's like, okay, so he's how we thought he was the whole time.
It proves that the prophecies are right, though. When it comes to Game of Thrones, that's still on like the top 100 best television shows,
like
ranked
13?
on IMDb.
Yeah.
And on The Last Kingdom, I'm pretty sure that one's pretty highly rated as well. Where do you think this falls?
I would say.
What would you say that?
I would say it's probably well below that.
No,
I would
what's the
give
rating?
I would give the first 2 episodes probably together a 6.5.
Okay, and what do you think the IMDb score is?
I'll go with 6.
Okay, it's a 5.2 right now.
Wow.
People say the first episode's a little awkward, and it gets better in the second episode. However, it sounds very brutal. Not as brutal as the Them series, which you said was also produced by MGM.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, that I heard got even crazier. Forbes called it a messy, Hollywoodized concoction that runs roughshod with the plot.
Well, I think that when you have the plot that this does, it's almost just kind of skeletal because there's so little to it. There's so little nuance in this show. By the end of the second episode, Durful and Arthur and all the people that he's with kind of get together. That's where the second episode leaves off. And it doesn't even seem like it's really that important in the
thing
end.
I liked about the Forbes interview, though, is that it was written by someone who had read the books. And so they talked about how there were a lot of things that were make-believe. Remember when I said how they followed the baby killing scene? Like, that was from the books.
Yes.
Well, stuff that wasn't from it was like Uther beating Arthur nearly to death. That was completely fabricated.
Okay, so at the very beginning of the first episode.
Yeah, and they added it, I guess, because Kate Brooke and Ed Whitmore felt like they wanted to tell the story that way.
Well, it feels like it's a ripoff of Game of Thrones almost, because if you remember Catelyn, or who's the person that dies in the Red Wedding?
A lot of them do.
The mom.
Mom
of
Catelyn Stark?
Yeah, she has that, I think, kind of epiphany a couple episodes prior that she's treated Jon Snow badly throughout that whole entire time.
Yeah, she does.
And here it seems like King Uther, when he's on the verge of death, also kind of realizes that he's treated Arthur badly this whole time as well. It seems like that.
There's a lot of revelations when you're on the deathbed. Like, that happens in Thor, that happens in House of the Dragon.
But even the show starts with text at the beginning of the first episode saying, decades of warring tribes have left the country divided. That just seems like Avatar: The Last Airbenders. Tensions simmer between pagans and Christians. High King Uther Pendragon struggles to unite the tribes to take on the greatest threat of all Saxons. But it's not only Star Wars, because you also have House of the Dragon. They started out with text. The Bastard Executioner, which I remember was the show that was on FX that barely lasted a season.
I would have to forgive them for that, though, because if you're telling a story that's been told so many different ways, you really do have to individualize it, like, and say, this is how we are starting ours. Like, this is how we are different.
But it doesn't. But it seems like every single show tries to do that.
No, but I'm saying because Arthur, Merlin, and Uther and all those have been told in so many different ways, you really do need to describe, unlike those other shows that you're talking about.
I just wish that there was another preferred way of telling us information than just throwing it at the viewer at the very beginning, because it seems like so many shows that take place in medieval time do that.
Yeah, I mean, the only two I can really think of most recently for this are Merlin and Camelot. But the other thing that they think that was made up was Arthur. Your favorite moment where Arthur saved the Saxon boy?
Yeah.
That they thought was made up in the death pit. Like, he was still in the death pit, Durfel was, but, like, he wasn't saved by Arthur.
Then how was he saved?
I have no idea.
Because there is a stake through this man's heart, and he's still able to survive.
Okay, AV Club did give it an A, and the reviewer didn't read the book. So
AV Club gave it not even an A-, an A.
An A.
I think that's the first time I've ever seen that.
Okay. You're making me self-conscious whether or not I need to go back to check that. But for all the graphic bloodshed, which spares neither infants nor dogs, the series doesn't glorify gore. The killing is full of terror and remorse.
No, I would say that when King Gunless, and when he comes and he kills everybody, it definitely does glorify gore.
All right. Collider says the Winter Kings ensemble cast is stacked, recommended it to people who liked House of the Dragon.
Okay, I think House of the Dragon you're going to like more than this. The acting was good. The costume and the score were great. And when it comes to the action, yeah, it's fine. They even
complimented Daniel Ings, the guy for Owain. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and I said Owain is probably my favorite character. I felt like you actually got more of him in the few scenes that he's in than you did for Durfel.
I only have a couple more of these. Variety, lengthy preamble weighed down with exposition, and Hollywood Reporter said bad wigs, rushed, and Game of Thrones knockoff.
Okay, bad wigs I agree with. Lengthy, I think that it would be fine if just the pacing was better. Why did we need the 30-minute kind of preamble of Arthur just to get to Durfel's storyline in the first episode, which ends and it's like, oh, okay, someone's killed his mom, and he's going to probably have a revenge arc. When it gets to the second episode, you understand how bad King Gunless is, so he does seem like a threat, but it's still how many episodes is
I think it's 10.
10. And yet, like, we're here in the second episode, and I have no idea where the show is supposed to go from here.
Well, with Game of Thrones, the reason I think it was so good for the first few seasons was it had the complex characters, political intrigue, high production value, shocking narrative twists that actually fit, that weren't just there because they were shocking, and it had a cultural impact. And I think that actually played into why it was so good, is because everybody was talking about it.
And
like so with this, no one's talking about it. The only thing I would say maybe is that there's political intrigue a little bit, and some of the reviews said the complex characters.
I mean, when you talk about political intrigue, I feel like they've killed off the person who had the most political storyline, which was Uther, because again, he's the king, and he's almost turning into, forgive the pun, but the Mad King because of how just crazy he is.
That's not really a pun. The last thing I have, though, for you is on a lighter note. It's just a trivia game dealing with the medieval and Renaissance literature, mostly the Arthur storyline, whether or not you're going to get it right. So true or false? Ready?
Yeah.
In addition to his sword, Excalibur, which, did they touch upon Excalibur at all?
I think you see it a couple times, yeah.
Arthur is also known to have a spear named Ron.
A spear named
Ron? True or
Ron?
false?
I would go with true, because at the very end of the second episode, Arthur has a little bit of an army. In fact, that's who takes out some of the people that were running after the crew, King Gunless. King Gunless people get taken out by spears.
Okay.
So I will go with true.
It's true. It's short for Rongo Miniad, and I think that just means spear in a different language. The reason Arthur was able to pull Excalibur from the stone was because Merlin placed a charm to loosen it. In the original tale.
I have never heard that, so I will go with false.
Well, you know the sword and the stone, where everybody tries to pull it out. Arthur pulled it out. You watched the cartoon.
Yes,
I'm
saying
right?
I know the story. I don't remember the charm though.
You don't remember the old Merlin casting a charm?
So I guess that it must be true.
No,
then,
it's
right?
false. The fattest knight at Arthur's King Arthur's round table was Circumference.
Circumference? No, that's false.
It's a joke.
Yeah,
I was making a joke. All right, the last thing I'll tell you, though, this is just a pure fact. Apparently, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, also a Renaissance literature with Arthur who is trying to find the Holy Grail, right? Mm-hmm. Last time I think they depicted it that I saw was in Mrs. Davis, that TV show. But the Monty Python movie, they didn't have the funding for it. Like, no studio wanted to produce it. So what they did was they went to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and got them to fund it for them, the people in the band. And then for Life of Brian, something very similar happened. And so what artist do you think they went to for funding?
I don't know, because Life of Brian came out in the 80s, right?
George Harrison.
They went to George Harrison, and
George Harrison funded it, yeah. And then when some people were complaining about like who they were working with, like John Cleese was kind of hard to act with or whatever, George Harrison was like, I worked with the Beatles for this long and we were sick of each other all the time. You can work with these people. And I was like, okay. And then he went back to work.
So they literally just asked bands and they gave him millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't realize how big a fan that like they were with comedies, but I like how the art industry was like helping itself. Yeah. Wish you could see a little bit more of that nowadays. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.